Well, the gossip on the street is that Twitter has come to a deal with Elon Musk that will be announced shortly. Obviously, we can't know that for sure until it's fully announced. But as you said, it's pretty well sourced. It's looking good so far. And according to reports, Twitter was getting a lot of pressure from shareholders that didn't want to see this deal slip through the cracks, because it was fundamentally a good deal for shareholders. The shareholders are going to make a lot of money if the deal goes through. And not all of Twitter's obviously a publicly traded company. Not all of Twitter's shareholders are of the opinion that letting elites control the flow of information is more important than making money.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. In a company, you have a fiduciary duty, you have a responsibility, and you can't oppress other shareholders. I'm using business law jargon. What I mean by that is, if there is a deal that is in the interests of the shareholders, you have an obligation as managers, as a board, to do that, even, frankly, if a minority of the company feels that way. And I don't know all the ins and outs of a battle, a shareholders' battle, but I suppose there could have been a ballot sent to everyone, every single shareholder. It could have gone around the board to it would have been a real brawl. It's interesting. I was looking at the biography of Robert Zoellick, the former deep state diplomat and White House boss, who's on the board. He's never tweeted once. He has just a handful of shares. And I started to do some more due diligence into Bob Zoellick. And one of his specialties is fighting against shareholder activism. And I thought, boy, I bet you Bob Zoellick's working the phones trying to fight off Elon Musk. The other day I was quite pessimistic, because although Elon Musk is the richest man in the world and he's very clever, there are other smart people, and frankly, they have collectively more money than him. I was very pessimistic. Were you pessimistic too? Did you think that the empire would strike back and stop him?
Frankly, I was a little. You could see all these giant corporations teaming up with this poison pill approach to stop Musk's takeover. A poison pill approach is where a company makes it easier, makes it cheaper for board members and existing shareholders to buy up more stock in order to make it harder for any one person to take a majority stake in the company. So certainly I was a little bit pessimistic about that. You have to remember, Twitter board is made up of giant corporations like Vanguard and State Street that manage trillions of dollars in assets. So if those corporations wanted to team up to stop Musk, they could have. These are the same corporations, by the way, that are pushing so-called ESG, ethical sustainable governance, across the corporate world. That includes diversity and critical race theory and wokeness in general. A lot of it comes from them. And you also saw other board members like the Saudi prince indicating they wouldn't take a deal. And lastly, as you pointed out, you have these other people on the board who have very little financial interest in Twitter. Their share is very minimal, but they're members of the establishment who probably recognize that Twitter's value is more than just money. It's about controlling the global flow of information, controlling narratives. However, I think what has happened is they couldn't get around, as you said, that fiduciary duty. The board of directors ultimately has to make a profit for their shareholders, and Elon Musk is presenting a very compelling offer there.
Yeah. You know, I've been thinking a lot about Twitter, and, this saying on Facebook, if you're not paying for the product or service, it's because you are the product and service. And on Facebook, that's obviously what is being sold. Your eyes and ears and your data are being sold to advertisers. And I think Zuckerberg is fairly candid about it. On Twitter, it's not just your interests and your eyes and ears that are being sold. It's your mouth that's being sold. And that's the thing. On Facebook, censorship's important there. But Facebook is not where all the politicians quarrel and go back and forth. It's more for family and friends and affinity groups. But Twitter is really the journalistic, political public square. And I think that was the intangible value to Prince Al-Walid of Saudi Arabia, to Bob Zoellick, the master of the universe. Sure, they like selling ads to eyeballs, but it's not the eyes and ears, it's the mouth. They wanted to be able to turn off voices, for example, that were critical of Big Pharma. They wanted to turn off voices that claimed the 2020 election for president was rigged. Those are some of the rules, by the way, on other social media. So while it pretends to be an advertising service, it was actually a censorship service, the same way the Ministry of Propaganda in the book 1984 was called the Ministry of Truth. I think that Twitter's real value to the Black Rocks and the Al-Waleeds of the world was they got to listen in on every private conversation amongst Twitter users, and they got to throttle the public conversations they didn't like.
That's correct. I think that became the case over a period of time since the 2016 election. You have to remember, Twitter was originally a free speech platform. That's how most of the original users of the platform remember it. And that is the case for most Silicon Valley platforms. In fact, Facebook originally had very light moderation. Reddit had free speech written into its terms of service. This was, to quote a Google document that leaked to me in 2018, free speech was in the DNA of Silicon Valley from the beginning. But I think what happened since 2016 is the elites realized how much control they'd lost because of this decentralization of media and this decentralization of information. They hadn't really realized it until the Trump election, how much control they'd lost over the narrative. So in their scramble to get that control back, they tried to exert control over all of these platforms. But I'm a bit more optimistic. I think it was really a counter-revolution. And as a counter-revolution, it's kind of failed because the mainstream media is still in decline. You had CNN Plus just shutting down recently. They were trying to do a streaming service, and that completely failed. No one under the age of, I'm exaggerating, but few people under the age of 45, 50 will be getting their news from CNN or the New York Times. It's all decentralized now. And the only way elites can maintain control is if they control content moderation on platforms like Twitter and Twitch and YouTube and Facebook, which are the home to these decentralized creators. And losing control over Twitter is, I think, the first domino. Once one major platform goes back to free speech, the elite's chokehold over information will start to crumble.
That was an excerpt from my daily TV-style show called The Ezra Levant Show. Each weekday, I do a monologue on the news of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest. I read some fan mail or hate mail, depends on which I like more. And we end with a video of the day. You can get it all at rebelnewsplus.com.